Imagine, for a moment, that you are alone, in a small, empty room no bigger than a nursery. Lit only by a dancing flame, which burns subtly from a retainer of exasperated oil, blooming just above the lantern's brassy collar. Reflections of the orange, burning stars stretch far enough to create shadows on your face. You hear the faint mumbling of guests to accompany a sitting room just floors below your sanctuary, most likely speaking ill of your behavior. A steady cascade of rain beckons at the solitary, shuttered window, white noise to your absent conscience. Along the perimeter of the room, you discover a new world within the patterns of the wall. A delicate flower, wilting, petals coating a neighboring plume of an indistinguishable gilded cloud. Adjacent, you catch the gentle movement of a woman who's slender yet wide in the hips, with coiled hair that gently falls in wisps around her shoulders. She doesn't notice you, nor your fascination with her performance. Brushing your hand across the textured wall, she doesn't react. She no longer moves. She guards her spot on the wall in a pose resembling that of Botticelli's Venus. She is gone, not in the physical sense, for she is very much there, but similar to the gone that our guests perceive of you. Your mind, unable to comprehend, begins to twitch. You don't know why, nor do you have the ability to control the reactions that have now migrated to your fingers, which begin defacing the woman, collecting jagged flakes of her youth under your fingernails. As the flame dies, you pause, resting along the brazen wood floor, and dream that the guest, gossiping below, too will see the dancing woman in the yellow wallpaper. In 1892, Charlotte Perkins Gilman published a poetic, yet sad, composition titled The Yellow Wallpaper. Her writing has remained a staple among critics due to her ability to convey an evolving lapse of time in which a woman, deranged by a darkening melancholy and bound to her room, becomes enthralled by the figures within her wallpaper. Gilman's work reflects that of a growing concern for mental health in light of the industrial age. The insane, lunatic, people of ill mind were impoverished by society due to their inability to contribute in both work and domestic life. Confided to the care of willing family members, life was similar to that of the woman in the yellow wallpapered room, locked away, existing in spaces that detached them from time. Soon, the insane, now abandoned, occupied a world that was originally denied to them. Due to violent attacks, suicide, and general nuisance caused by the derelicts that plagued public spaces, concern for public safety grew, thus prompting initial legislative efforts to house the mentally unstable in 1848, birthing the barbaric, debilitating, and experimental institutions frequently illustrated in horror media, the asylum. William Fitzgerald, a middle-aged farmer, served as the first keeper of the insane in 1851. His scenic farm, complete with cattle, machinery, and ample land, located at the edge of Randolph County, Indiana, matched idealistic healing properties that newly appointed psychologists argued were key to rehabilitation. Fresh, warm air, room to roam, and a calming atmosphere. Over the course of 1 year, he maintained 16 paupers, though the majority were old, weak, or too mentally absent to perform contractual duties on Fitzgerald's farm. William would argue that his position lacked benefit, urging the county to supply a better means for accommodating the insane. By 1853, a one-story wooden building was erected on the Fitzgerald farm, spanning 60 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 12 feet high. Sadly, the asylum would only stand for a year's time. In 1854, a fire erupted, eating away at the panels of dry timber, trapping all 16 residents. From his neighboring home, Fitzgerald recalled awakening to an orchestra of screams, some pleading for forgotten maternal figures, others suffocating underneath a billowing cloud of ash and smoke, melting the remaining remnants of their sanity. In 1855, Fitzgerald was granted another newly constructed asylum, but it was later demolished by the state. It was believed that residents survived in cold, isolated cells with walls of growing black mold that bled along cement barriers, breeding new diseases. Moreover, many inmates were considered feral, lacking any social and cultural concept, and merely existing on animalistic instinct. Caged like the poultry that shared adjoining stalls in a nearby barn, residents lived among feculence and decay as if a vital element within an undignifying ecosystem. To combat the recorded neglect, funding for a third and final asylum completed in 1899 led to what we now know as the Randolph County Asylum and Infirmary. The institution was shaped similar to that of a cathedral, having a central nave that intersected perpendicular towards the tip, and a symmetrical brick facade featuring twin cylindrical towers that flanked a series of large windows. Wielding a daunting presence and lacking any sense of serenity, the asylum was designed to accommodate up to 100 of the insane within its 6 segregated wards, many of whom would become subject to the horrors of experimental procedures habitually practiced within such institutions. You see, the reason behind cerebral abnormalities was unclear. At the time, a surge in somatic remedies flooded medical professions, believing that mental health was directly linked to a defect in our central nervous system. Over the course of the asylum's life, patients were exposed to electroconvulsive therapy, in which a degree of seizure-inducing electricity was emitted into the brain and believed to have provided relief as well as alterations in one's depression. Worst of all, the lobotomy was performed on individuals who experienced extreme psychological symptoms. In this practice, doctors would utilize silver ice picks to enter the cranial cavity via the eye socket just above the eyeball. Once the sharpened tip reached the fleshy membrane of the frontal lobe, a hammer was used to lodge the pick into the brain, severing nerves that were believed to arouse bouts of schizophrenia. These mistreatments would lead to even the most disturbed itching to claw their way out of Randolph County Asylum. For a select unfortunate few, death was the key. 2 known instances of untimely death stain much of the asylum's history: Ida Gunkel's suicide and John Champ's murder. Mrs. Gunkel was dropped off at Randolph County Asylum because her growing delusions and aggravated outbursts became intolerable for her immediate family. Strangely, Ida only recently began to acknowledge disparities in her cognitive behavior, suggesting her husband may have had a hand in passing along these traits. Francis Gunkel, World War I veteran, contracted syphilis during his time in combat. If left untreated, syphilis evolves into neurosyphilis, which is an infection of the central nervous system and ultimately the brain. He was discharged for exhibiting lunatic behavior, most likely caused by syphilis meningitis. Upon returning home, the disease swiftly passed to Ida, who too became irrational. Staff at Randolph County Asylum lacked medical qualifications and could not properly attend to Ida's growing uncertainty. So they locked her away in a cell below the main hall. One evening, Ida requested a broom for the purpose of sweeping away the debris and wildlife that collected in the corners of her room. On August 2nd, 1938, Ida positioned the broom so that it was suspended between pipes above her head. Using a strip of cotton from her bedding, she lassoed it around the horizontal, hanging broom and jumped from her bed. Staff discovered her later that night, dead, as the dried flowers that adorned her nightstand. John Champ, unlike Ida, failed to predict the time of his death, nor did he have a hand in premeditating it. An elderly man, having called the asylum home for many years, John was the source for constant torment and bullying by other male inmates. While washing his second-floor dorm window, 2 inmates trailed behind John, pushing him with brunt force. John fell out the open window, head first, his body fusing with the landscape below. The asylum remained in operation until 2008. The property is said to have witnessed up to 200 deaths, though only 50 are buried in the asylum's adjoining cemetery. The other bodies presumed missing. Visitors claim to see shadow figures pacing the attic, moaning sounds that echo throughout each ward, as well as sightings of Ida herself, luring onlookers into her forgotten domain. Other parts of the farm, such as a small white shed thought to be a slaughterhouse turned embalming room during the cholera epidemic, houses details of a once volatile environment, such as shackles, meat hooks, and human-made abrasions along the crumbling stone walls. If, by chance, you have the opportunity to visit the Randolph County Asylum, hold on tight to your sanity, because you too may find yourself experiencing activity beyond comprehension.